everybody, welcome to DCPC Live presents Scene Support, the podcast that highlights the unsung heroes of the music scenes, recording engineers, show promoters, labels, graphic artists, photographers, zine writers, sound people. You know what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm your host, Scott Pash, owner and operator of DCPC Live, a DIY label that documents the live hardcore punk, ska, and metal scene on short-run vinyl. I've got 30 years of playing in hardcore punk bands in DC, New York, and Florida, and I've been hunting around doing booking and promoting shows as well. I've had the privilege to talk to a lot of dope people, but today is one of the dopest dudes I've met. His name is Tony Murphy, not Tony Budd, who among other things is the sound person at Will's Pub in Orlando, one of the best venues for underground music, for punk, ska, metal, emo, or whatever the fuck ever. I met Tony at Florida Underground Fest, where he helped me set up and record a bunch of bands, hardcore, punk, ska, metal, etc., for a pop compilation, and hanging out with him, I got to really fucking like the dude. And I was like, you know what, he'd be a fucking perfect person to pull on here to hear what it was like to be a sound guy at a venue that has the local bands that have gone nowhere and the big touring bands that sell it out, everything in between. And I bet he's got a lot of great fucking stories, so we're going to hear them. What's going on, Tony?
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing fucking great. It's so good to see you, dude.
Yeah, you too, man. It's been a little... I mean, it hasn't even been that long since Florida Underground, but...
It hasn't, but it still feels like 1,000 years ago.
I know, especially with such long days.
Yes. Oh my gosh, by the end of Sunday, I was just totally like... Holy hell.
Yeah, it's just that, it's that fest vibe, you know, you're just long days, drinking PBRs, you know.
Non-stop. And you had to stay, how late did you have to stay after the show's over to tear down all the microphones and put everything away? Like, what's the cleanup time for a sound guy?
Well, okay, so for this one, we kind of, because we did the recording setup and stuff, it was like a more involved setup and tear down on the day one and the last day. But because we had so much going on and we were sharing backline every night with the drums and the cabs, I had already negotiated with one of the audio guys that works there. I was like, let's just leave everything up.
Nice.
So we don't have to tear it down and set it up every day. Like, nobody's going to fuck with it, so we'll just leave it like that. So it was nice because, you know, Friday night, Saturday night, you know, you just turn everything off and make sure nothing's dangerous for someone to trip on. And then, you know, Sunday takes, it maybe like another hour or something to tear down all the mics, wrap up cables, you know, make sure the stage is clean so there's not a bunch of trash left on there and stuff.
But almost worth it not to do it again Friday and Sunday. Yeah, Friday and Saturday, right?
Yeah. I think the most part was the beer cans. There was a lot of beer cans on stage, but, you know.
Is that your responsibility? Shouldn't that be someone else's responsibility?
Well, it's kind of not, but, you know, I don't mind helping. It's one of those things that's like, hey, it's my stage. When I'm working, it's my stage, so I take care of it. And, you know, I want it to, you know, it's the worst when you show up to a gig the next day and there's a bunch of beer cans and broken drumsticks and trash all over from the band before. And you're like, come on, man. Like, it just looks bad to the band that comes in, you know?
That just reminds me of all the years I did retail and restaurant work, and you show up and the fucking closers didn't do their damn job, so...
Exactly. It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
All right, so how long have you been doing sound at Will's for?
So I've been I've been there for about 2.5 years now.
Okay.
It's been cool. I don't do it full time. I'm usually there maybe 2 nights a week, sometimes more if it's like really busy or I'm covering, or sometimes less if it's slow. But
okay,
it's been a blast.
Awesome. So were you doing sound somewhere else before there, or like what's your path to sound guy? Like, did you wake up one day and go, I want to sit here and have bands yell at me from the stage all the time?
Well, it's funny. I fell into it. I almost I would have never guessed I'd be doing sound for bands and I'd love it as much as I do. I got into recording music about 10, 12 years ago, mainly just because I was playing in punk bands and we'd go to studios and record and we'd spend a lot of money, and I was always fascinated by it, and also I was always broke. So I was like, maybe I should learn how to just do this myself so we can put out music and not have to all figure out how to come up with like $1,200 a piece to put out an album. And that's even keeping it on the cheap side, as you know, because of the stuff you deal with your records. Yep. It is not an expensive, it's not a cheap industry.
I've managed to like shortcut the expensive recording by doing the live records, you know, but even so, you know, mixing and mastering still costs money and pressing the records, but it definitely saves me that I can record 4 bands for the cost of one day in a studio for one band. So that's been like my saving grace of expenses. Where
Yeah.
sometimes bands suck ass live, and
You got to
sometimes
pay
the
the.
recording engineer fucks up, and I'm like, well, I got nothing. It's
Yeah.
four bands, and none of it's usable. It does happen.
Dang.
So
Well, yeah. So to continue, because
yeah,
I'm gonna just the preface.
yeah,
I'm gonna get sidetracked just as well.
love it.
Super ADHD. So we're gonna end up. Who knows where we're gonna end up?
I
But
love it, dude. Go with it, man.
so yeah, I'm recording bands, and that's kind of like starting to take off as like what I'm doing for my job. And I know a lot of the local promoters because I also play in a band, Overthinker, and I'm good friends with Marshall, who was one of the people that helped.
From Montgomery Drive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he helped with Florida Underground as well with Jacob from Havoc Underground. But Marshall hit me up one day. I guess I think it was Cartel, like the main house engineer. I think
Yeah.
he had like a surgery or something, and he was out. And they had a show. It was just an acoustic night, something super simple.
Yeah.
And Marshall's like, "Hey, dude, this is like crazy, but I know you like know about sound stuff because you're recording. Like, is there any way you can cover a show tonight? Because we don't have a sound guy, and like we're freaking out." And I'm like, yeah. I mean, I'm sure I could do that. I've never really been in charge of it, but I've played my fair share of like DIY venues where the
Yeah.
band's kind of is the sound guy anyway. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like,
Any
so I'm
number
like,
of those.
I've had to be that guy, and I've used digital consoles before, even in the studio. So yeah, I went in, I did this acoustic show, and then it went fine. And then I got asked about a bunch of other shows for the remainder of the month while he was out on his surgery. So I was like, sure, I guess I could use the money. And fumbled my way through it, and then started to really figure it out and like enjoy it, and applied some of my like studio practices, which doesn't always translate to live, but like a lot of things like understanding EQ, compression,
Yeah.
balancing, what kind of mics do what kind of things, understanding the difference between dynamic mics and all that. So I kind of ended up doing okay, I guess, and they kept asking me to come back, and then after a few shows, I started getting some bands come through that were like like really good. So I was like, oh, I want it to sound awesome. So I started
Yeah.
trying new things and experimenting with how I could like make the sound better, because it's the audio guy in me. It's same thing in the studio. Like I'm always striving for like the best sounding mix you can get. So
So
I do it live, and it's a challenge. So it's kind of fun.
is there like a division line, like in hierarchical system of recording engineers in the studios versus sound guys, and now you crossed over and you're doing both? Is there like a difference of like just different people?
I mean, some people will say that. Like, I actually do know a lot of people now who are from both worlds.
Okay.
You could talk to a lot of people, and everybody's gonna have their own opinion on it. Some of the older, like, been doing it for 20 years, sound guys, they'll sit there and be like, "Oh, you're a studio guy. You're not gonna last a day at a live show. You're not gonna understand what we got to deal with." And like, you know what? I can understand, because in the studio, when you're trying to make sure that microphone sounds great on a snare drum, you can spend 30 minutes tweaking with it if you want to. Nobody cares. You're on studio time. But in a live show, when you're doing a sound, especially a line check in the middle of like multiple bands, you got about 10 minutes tops after they set everything, because the band probably already took a little too long to set up. So you probably got 5 minutes before their scheduled start time. So you got to go, So it's like, it is different. You have to be on the fly. And I found I like the challenge.
Yeah.
At first, it was like I remember being like a little stressed out at first, because I was like, ooh, like, I don't know if it's good enough, but you just get quick with it, and it's cool because it translates over. Like, now my ears for like pinpointing frequencies that need to be corrected
Yeah.
are so on point because of live, that when I do a mix in the studio, I'm mixing a song in like significantly less time, and I'm happier with the results. And it's just
sick.
they kind of go hand in hand. There are some differences. You never
But it
deal
sounds
with
like
feedback in
they
the studio.
complement each other, and you're like
Yeah.
using the skills from both. So
Yeah.
you mentioned like the DIY venues, bands running it. Whenever I've done venues like that, invariably it's just basically vocal mics, and
Yeah.
then you just make sure people can hear you, and you ask somebody standing 20 feet out if they can hear the vocals over
Yeah.
everything else. But like it wills you, like everything all the time, or do you ever have shows where you just do everything's mic'd every time?
Usually, yeah. I mean, there are instances. I mean, I like to do that, but it depends. You know, if I got a band like, I feel bad. I can't remember their name. They have a really cool logo that looks like the PV Amp logo, but it's their It's, I'm forgetting their name, unfortunately, but they have like this crazy wall of amps, and it's like their whole thing. I've talked to them about it. These guys like built their own amps. They're like amp builders. They're gear nerds. And their whole thing, I forget exactly what they said, but it was something along the lines of, it's 12,000 watts and 48 speakers. Like, they had this crazy system, and like, so we looked at each other and was like, yeah, I'm not miking up those guitar cabs. That's obvious. He was like, you don't need to do that.
He's like, it's not necessary. We know what to do.
So in a situation like that, it's like, all right, let me just, just try to make sure the drums and the vocals can keep up with the guitar. So in those situations, Or like sometimes, even if a band has maybe a little too loud of guitars, where I'm not really pushing it into the main speakers, I might still mic it up just for the purpose that I can now send that into monitors for somebody on like the drums or the other side of the stage. And be like, hey, can I hear him better? I can still use the microphone as a monitor, so.
Okay, so you just like said a bunch of stuff that makes you think like, so I'm a drummer, and I'm doing my sound check, and I have to think, it's like, should I be hitting my snare drum as hard as I hit it when I'm playing? Or should I be like, so like, you want me to like give you my maximum, like, this is what it's going to be. Otherwise you have to adjust it later. And how much adjustment do you do? Like, do you add any EQ to the bass drum? Like my bass drum just fucking shitty tuned, because I imagine a lot of bands roll in there and they've been on tour and they haven't adjusted their bass drum head. Maybe ever. They put it on and said, fuck it, it's good. Like, do you have to deal with EQ for all those different things?
All the time, yeah. So, first, before I forget, to give you what I would say as, like, from a sound guy's perspective, the best way to check a drum is I want to hear everything. I want you to do some soft hits and go da-da-da-da-da-da. I want to hear some fast rolls, some ghost notes, because I want to hear how it sounds when it's full volume. And I'm also using a lot of gates to try to help cut bleed to make the mix sound cleaner.
Gotcha.
So if I have my gate set too high and you hit softly and I don't hear it, that's gonna, you're gonna lose some important information. Like a lot of drummers that play with ghost notes, you have to know to turn your gate a little less, the sensitivity down so it can get those. So like in an ideal world, this is for all drummers out there, try to give a round robin. Like definitely do not skip out on the heaviest hits you got. Because that's really, I need to make sure you're not clipping. I don't want to make sure you hit it as hard as you can and it blows the whole system out because it's too loud. But give me some go give them a little bit of the dynamics that you hear in a drum set.
30 years I've just been going whack, 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 whack. That's literally what I've done for 30 years.
Yeah. Which is fine.
It's not. You told me what I should have been doing and I haven't been doing it.
Yeah. Well, it's fine in the sense, like, I mean, if you just did that, I'll be fine, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you really were like, I'm trying to be, like, the most, like, helpful I can, that would probably be the best way to do it. You'll hear a lot of drummers, they go, ba, 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 da. Like, that's kind of, like, the really common one a lot of drummers do. That works really well,
Do you ever give drummers advice? Like, you just gave me great advice now. Do you ever give them advice, like, hey, you've never, like, new drummers or even people that are, like, you just have a feeling they don't know what they're doing. They've never been mic'd before. It's like, hey, this is the best way to give me a sound check, or do you just kind of let it go and see what they do?
I usually try to, and that's also, that differs back to like the producer, studio engineer side of me, because when I'm recording a band, and it really, really, really matters how good everything sounds. Like, not to say live is just as important, but recording, it's permanent. You hear it once, and that's how it is forever. So I will be instructing drummers all the time in the studio, like, okay, you're hitting these shells way too soft, man. Like, you gotta smack them, because the tone of those drums doesn't come out until you have the whole shell ringing. But then, like, there's also drummers that, like, they're always 100%, and sometimes the velocity dynamics is important in drumming. This is why, there's a lot of talk these days with newer software drums and stuff about how MIDI drums have come so far and you don't need to record real drums, and it's like
I
big thing. You notice it. I do too. And the big thing you notice is like the velocity of the hits is so important, and it's something that like you're not hitting the drum the same time every time. If you were, you're a
Yeah,
robot. It's not
it's
real.
not possible. I mean, you could look at all the marks on my like drums, and you can see that I'm hitting at different places every time.
Hmm.
And there's always fluctuations. My arm's getting a little tired. Something
Yep.
happened. My
Yep.
brain wandered for a moment. Like shit happens. Um,
Dude, even just the sound of your left and your right stick are
yeah,
different because you have a dominant hand. And like
absolutely.
it's hard to program that into fake drums. But
And,
anyway,
no, but
I
that's like
I'll
really
give those
interesting.
tips. Yeah.
Okay, so it's another question. This is like me, just like things I've been wanting to ask sound people forever. I know when I've been
Sure.
in bands, my guitarists always have like their sound. They've got their triple rectifier. They know what they want it to sound like. You put that mic up to it. You're not just giving volume through the PA. You are adjusting it, right? So are you adjusting the guitar sound that my guitarist spent hours and money developing to make it perfect own and going, yeah, this is what you're gonna sound like tonight, motherfucker.
Okay, so that's a really good question. Because with EQ on guitar, yeah, you can definitely totally change the way a guitar amp sounds.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you are actually just EQing the way the microphone sounds, not the amp.
Okay.
So I don't really, most of the time, especially as a guitar player, I've always joked, I got the word tone in my name. I love guitar tone. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for it. So when I hear a good amp and a good tone, I'm not fucking with it. The only thing I do is the way a microphone works on a speaker is sometimes there'll be certain frequencies. In the audio world, a lot of times we call them whistle frequencies. You'll hear like
Oh,
very
yeah.
finely in the sound. So I'll find that frequency and just like cut that one frequency out. And there might be a couple of them like that, but I'll do that. I have had, admittedly, a band comes in and their tone is like there's no low end. It's all treble and harsh and hurts your ears. And sometimes I might go in there and like boost a little low end just to try to balance it out and help them out. But usually it's better to just kind of talk to them and say, "Hey, your tone cool, but like it is a little bit harsh. Maybe if you just like bring the treble down and like boost
Yep.
your mids a little bit." Some people get a little defensive about that because they did take their time, and then some people like genuinely are like, "Dude, thank you for telling me that. I always wonder why my tone sounded weird." Like they just didn't know. So
I just don't know.
I don't
Well,
think it's weird, but
there's a band I love live, but I can't listen to their records because there's something about the frequency that they record their albums at that it actually causes like the sides of my head, the temples to hurt. And I'm like,
oh
I don't know why this is happening to me. And it's like a dog whistle. Like I don't hear anything, but like it just hurts. And I'm like, damn,
yeah,
I love this band live, but every time I put on the record, and like maybe it's something like what you were just describing there,
yeah,
where it's some sort of weird tone they're hitting that just doesn't work for my ears. So
yeah. That's a real thing. There are definitely frequencies that just like are harsher to listen to. And you'll see it a lot with especially with mastering engineers, but also with mix engineers. They'll know exactly what those frequencies are. It's like
there we
right
go.
off
We
the
got rid of
gate.
that. That's
They
gotta
listen
go.
they listen to a mix for 15 to 30 seconds and they go, "Oh, yeah, I got to fix all these things." And a lot of times it's those because you got to make sure there's like listener comfort in the recording world, we've been in this thing called the loudness wars for, years now,
Yeah.
but if you look at, I've seen like a comparison of like waveforms of recordings from like the 50s and 60s and then into the 80s and then into the 2000s and currently, and like it went from like these dynamic like waveform shaped songs to just
Yeah.
like this straight brick of song, and
Yes.
it's like everything's just trying to be louder and more slamming, and like trust me, I
Is
mean I love loud pumping mixes, but it is interesting because when you
is
have
that
to
the
bring
Phil
something.
Spector wall of sound? Is that what that is?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. See,
So
I know a little bit, not much. Like I mean,
yeah,
I really, I feel like in all the years I've been doing, I should know more about this, but like I just have no knowledge, and I was just watching you, and I'm like, okay, this is so. Yeah, because like I'll do shows and there won't be anyone there. Like, and there'll be a PA and the club doesn't have anyone that does it, and you bring your own mics and they're like, "Can you run this?" I'm like, I mean, yeah, I know how to turn it on, and like I can make sure that like I was like so basic, so
yeah.
so very basic. I don't know what EQ to put on the vocal mics. Like I don't ask me to do anything like that. I can do volume control. You know, my Josh, Danger Room, he'll send me stuff like he's like, "Hey, I know I just sent you a mix 2 hours ago, but here's a different mix. What do you think?" I'm like,
You can't even really hear the difference.
I can't tell a difference, and I feel so bad because he's so excited about what he did. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, it's funny because that is like a real thing in the audio community. It's something we joke about a lot, but it isn't totally talked about in like the world. It's like the average listener does like to have the ability to pinpoint weird frequencies and like to be able to just like listen to a song and you're only listening to the way that snare drum sounds or the bass guitar sounds.
yeah,
Like it takes a little bit of practice and like training to get that with your ears, and like it's something anybody can learn, but and you don't normally just have that ability. Like some people are born like
yeah.
savant kind of stuff, but like most of the time it's something that's learned. So it's funny because you become your biggest critic when you listen to your mix and you're like, it's good, but like I know that I got like this list of 10 problems, but you show 20 friends and they're all like, dude, this sounds fucking awesome.
Yep, they
And
hear
you're like,
nothing
but
wrong
what's
with it.
wrong with it? And they're like, what do you mean what's wrong with it? And you're like, I need someone to just tell me I'm not crazy. That's really what it is, because I'm hearing something and it sounds a little fucked up. But then that's kind of what's cool about the audio world is it becomes very closely knit, and like I mean I couldn't say I'm friends with everybody, but I know a lot of people, and it's very easy to like have those people where you can send them a mix of a song and they'll be like really be like, oh dude, this sounds great, but something is weird with your snare drum. Like I'm hearing it and you're like, thank you, like I was hearing it too, and I'm glad somebody told me because nobody else
Yeah,
hears it.
no one else hears it because the band's like, yeah, it sounds fine. Like I can tell if a guitar's out of tune, but I can't tune a guitar, right? So like my
Yeah.
ears are not like skilled in that way. So like, okay, you're in a band, you're playing shows. Do you walk in and walk in? People's like, "Hi, I'm Tony. I'm a sound guy, so you better sound good tonight because I know what it should sound like."
It's happened. Most of the time, the people that are in the audio world, they're actually the most under. Like I just did a show last night, and one of the bands playing. After the set, the guitar player was like, "Oh yeah, we work at this venue in Melbourne, and like I'm the sound guy there. So like, thank you for doing a good job." And like, you know, I wouldn't say anybody was difficult, but there was one of the bands was just like having a hard time with monitors, and they were like trying to get me to turn it up more, and I'm like trying to do this for them. I'm like the classic sound guy of like
Yeah,
pretending. I try
yeah,
to do it, but the problem is the reason that most sound guys will not actually turn anything up is because they already know that you are at 100%, and if you go past that, you're going to start having a mess of other problems. But I'll
So
try and see if I can figure it out, and then you get a little feedback in the monitor. So I'm like, oh, sorry, I got to take it back. It's
so
not going to
what
work.
causes that issue? Because I've gone to enough shows in my life, a couple hundred every year. I would probably a couple hundred bands I
Sure.
see every year, right? And I'm like, yeah. There's always been it says turn up the monitor, or can I get more vocals in here? And is that something that like actually can be fixed, or how does that problem occur, or is the band just like I don't know? Like I know as a drummer, I like
Yeah.
okay,
Okay, well, so there's every one of those things is a real thing that's happened. A lot of times, like Will's Pub, for instance,
yeah,
I love that venue. It's a great small club. It's like the energy and the vibes there, especially when the shows are packed out. It's like I've never had a better time at shows. But it is a small stage in basically like a little clamshell. You know what I mean?
yep,
Like the stage is just like boxed into a corner, and the way that sound travels and bounces off of walls and stuff, and like low end accumulates in the corners. When you have a lot of microphones and speakers all in such a small, tight, enclosed space, it becomes more problematic when you start turning things up. Just because your mics are so, I mean, you've
yeah,
you've seen it. You
yeah.
put
I've
the
seen it.
microphone too close to a speaker, it starts doing that.
Yeah,
Well, the more that you turn things up, the more that you start adding gain, which is, just like a guitar amp, it starts adding like harmonics and color to it.
yeah,
The more that it's going to start being more sensitive to that happening from further distances.
sure, sure,
And at a venue like Will's, you've got the stage here, you've got monitors here, and the main speakers are right here. So like they're all within 5 feet of that microphone at any given time. And like you don't see that problem on bigger stages because the microphones are much farther away from this shit. So it becomes a problem, and like, you know, a lot of bands have been starting to switch over to getting like in-ear monitors and stuff, and that's like really like probably one of the best workarounds to this. You know, you can get there are definitely ways to work around it and have better monitoring and louder monitoring with speakers on the floor, but at the end of the day, like even at Will's, our wedges for the monitors are pretty good and loud speakers. I think they're like 1,000-watt speakers. And there have been times where, like, I've had a band want me to turn something up so loud, and, like, I can hear the monitor louder than I can hear the main speakers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And they're sitting there like, I can't hear it. They're sitting here saying, I can't hear it enough. And I'm looking at them like, I don't want to be a dick, dude, but, like, I can hear it from over here. How can you not hear it?
How can you not, right? So but, what is it? Like
I think, you know, it varies from artist to artist, but, you know, I think sometimes musicians tend to, like, when they're in their zone, it's easy for them to, like, almost block that out, and they don't realize they're blocking it out, so then they're like, I can't hear it. Like, I've had this in the studio. I've had this in the studio with drummers a lot in particular. Drummers who are not, like, comfortable and used to playing to a metronome. I've had drummers... I have the metronome in their ear, and it is like, beep, boop, boop, like smack in their ear, right?
Yeah.
And they're like still falling off. And I'm like, can you hear the metronome? And they're like, honestly, no, I can't hear it. And I'm like, okay, there's no way you're not hearing it. What you're doing is you are unintentionally like blocking it out.
Yes.
And so like that can be the case. Sometimes it also is not even that, you know. Another problem like at a small venue like Will's, you're standing here and you've got this floor monitor on the floor and the mic's here. Yep. But really, that speaker is pointing at your chest or like even lower, like your stomach. Really, like ideally, that speaker should be like out here. So when it's pointing, it's sounds traveling at your head. But we don't have enough room on the stage to put this monitor that far forward in front of you.
See,
and everybody wants as much room on stage.
Monitor there, so
that's so nice. Which is funny because a lot of drummers don't even use it anymore.
I love it. Like 90% of the time, I play shows that don't have drum monitors, and then the stages are so small that the amps are in front of me almost. And I'm like,
and you can't hear anything from behind the amps. Yeah.
And if I know the songs well enough, and I have muscle memory, I only need to hear a little bit here and there to know what I'm doing. But like I joined a band like a year and a half ago, and then we did our first show and didn't do a sound check, and then they couldn't hear each other, and I couldn't hear them, and I'm like, I have no muscle memory because I got nothing. Yeah. I'm just going to slop my way through this nonsense. But I love it when I can actually hear, even if it's just guitar, you know, or if it's, even vocals can help me. Like, I just need a pinpoint to, like, help me, like, know where I'm at in case I, like, lose focus or, you know, it's all I need.
Your stick slips a little bit and you got to, like, fumble and catch it and you're like, uh-oh. Did I just miss a beat? I don't remember, you know?
Exactly. It's like, I dropped my stick. I grabbed another one pretty quickly, but where are we now?
Yeah.
So, did I miss the transition into the chorus, or do we still in the verse?
Yeah. All right. Plus, I mean, the other thing is, like, the whole reason all of us started playing in bands is those first, like, early days when we started jamming in, like, a garage or whatever. You're vibing off each other, you're playing off of each other's feelings, and so if you can't hear each other, you're not really meshed together as a band, you know? You're just all individual musicians that are hopefully playing at the same time.
Well, it's like when I talk to Don Ziantara, like a lot of what he does is live recordings, you know, of the bands. Like, you know, starting back with like Teen Idols and Minor Threat. He's like, I still like to do it that way. He's like, because it's, you know, it's comfortable. It's like you're having a band practice and you're playing with each other. He's like, you know, if you're the band that doesn't want to do it that way, though, he's like, it's fine. If you want to lay down drum tracks, then bass track, then guitar track, if that's what you're comfortable with. But it's like, the song has to be there. But it's like feeding off of each other. He's like, that's the best part.
Yeah. So, when a band that's even in the studio world, when a band that's like really tight live, if you can do like even like if it's like a totally isolated live recording, those live recordings tend to just be like the best stuff than like individually tracking because it's the same thing. They're feeding off each other. Yeah. You know.
So what's the biggest issue you've ever had with the band? Like, has a band ever gotten like really angry and like been like, fuck you, sound guy, or stormed off stage? I'm like, you ever had to deal with that?
I guess a little bit. I I've never had anything where people are too upset with me. I have had people come at me with attitudes before they even said hello, which is kind of annoying.
That's weird.
But I get it, because being a musician, I've played in bands where I show up to a venue, we're all like, hey, yeah, we're excited to play a show. And the sound guy's like, so you got 2 guitar players tonight? Oh. And it's
yeah.
Like
I've definitely dealt with the grumpy sound guy. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm sure as a drummer you get it the most, especially, God forbid, you have an extra tom. Some sound guys
or double bass.
Dude, sound guys lose their mind over having to set up an extra tom mic. And I don't have that approach. So I've had people kind of come in, and I'm like, yo, what's up? I'm Tony, and they're like, hey. And I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
We're gonna be a good show tonight, man. Like, let's it's like I've had people kind of like come a little standoffish at first, but once we get through it, they're usually happy. There was one time, it was actually really sad. There was a band that the guitar player was having an issue with his like wireless or something.
Oh.
And it was like causing problems during sound check, so he was like stressed about it. And then during the set, or before the set, he thought he got it figured out, so he's like, we should be good. And then during the set, like halfway through the first song, it like fucked up and like lost the guitar, and he was so embarrassed and so upset. He threw his guitar and stormed off stage. And It was so sad because, like, what the crazy part is they were crushing it. Even though that problem was going on, they were crushing it, and the crowd was, like, vibing. And, like, they played one song and ended it because he was so mad about the technical difficulty. And I remember feeling like, fuck, like, I feel like I hopefully could have been able to do something. And he came up later, he's like, dude, that wasn't your fault, right? And I was like, I know, but, like, I still feel bad. Like, you could have just faked it through the show and just like laugh about it, like, oh, we're having some issues, but like, fuck it, we're rock and roll.
Yeah, that's
what
I would have done.
He was just, I think it was just too much built up of like you wanted it to be this perfect show and it didn't go perfect, and that one. I felt so sad about that because I was like, man, like, they were like the people were so mad that they didn't keep playing because they were like, oh, keep going, it was awesome. The crowd was loving it. And it was
couldn't
like,
he just
damn,
plugged into his amp instead of doing the wireless? Did he have a guitar cord?
I can't remember. It might not have even been a wireless. It might have been like some people have these like setups now where they use a laptop as their guitar amp and it like runs into a interface.
Yeah.
So it might have been that. I can't remember. It was something. It had something technical going on with some more advanced guitar stuff. That's all I remember. But
and it's hard. Like if you don't have a guitar, it's the only guitar in the band. I mean, guitar is kind of important. I've heard.
Yeah.
In rock music.
Just a little bit.
I mean, I had a show once where I was borrowing someone's kid and the bass drum, head broke into the second song, and I was like, well.
Dude.
That's it. I guess I'm just playing without a bass drum the rest of the set, and I just did, and I was irritated as fuck. But what was I going to do? Stop the set, bring on a new bass drum? That's just not going to happen. So I just sucked it up, Buttercup, and played with a broken bass drum.
Dude, we had that. My band, we did a tour. This was actually one of our first tours, like right before COVID happened. We were playing at some like house show, basement show in Philly.
Yeah.
And it was this place, they called it the Carlisle House. It was on Carlisle Ave or something. Cool spot. Shout out Tom Kinka. He was the dude that rented it and had shows. But there was like a house kit there, and same thing happened like in the first song. The beater went right through the bass drum head.
Yep.
And it was funny because it was one of those situations where our drummer was like, they want to use a house kit. Like, he has like a nice DW collector's kit. He was like, really, he paid a lot of money for it. He brings it on the road. He wants to play his drum set. And I was like, dude, look, it's a Philly house show in a basement. Philly apartments are like this fucking wide.
Yep.
And the stairs are like death stairs. Like, you don't want to bring your drums up and down that shit, bro. Yeah. It's fine. And then like the beater went through and the whole set, he's just pretending with his fucking foot and there's no kick drum.
Yep.
But it's a house show anyway.
Yep.
It's a house show anyway. The kick wasn't even mic'd up, so you couldn't hurt. You probably didn't hear it anyway, but
it was funny. The snare drum kept going.
You just got to play it through it.
Yep.
You just got to play through it.
All right. So, do you have any like crazy stories? Like, I figure between, even if it's only 2 or 3 nights a week, you see a lot of bands, and you have to have seen some shit, right?
Yeah. I mean, probably one of the. I don't even think it's crazy. It's just like when you tell the story, people are like, "They did what?"
What?
But there's this band. They're actually apparently coming back through Orlando again. They're doing a tour soon. I've done their show twice now. It's like almost like a once a year they'll make it down to Florida. It's a band called Southern Culture on the Skids.
Oh yes, I know that
They
band.
are. I forget what they have. They have their own like they hold on. I'm gonna look it up so I don't say this wrong. They have coined their own genre because they do like it's like rockabilly surf rock but with some country influence. They let's see. It doesn't even say. I forget where. Well, I don't want to dig too hard on it, but they I think they just say it at the show. They coined themselves like hillbilly surf rock or something like that because it's like a little bit of kind of country bluegrassy influence, but it's like super surf rocky, very punk. But they have a song called like Fried Chicken.
Okay.
And they have, and it's not even a rider thing. It's like part of their production. They require this at every venue, that the venue or the promoter provides them with like a bucket or box of fried chicken.
Okay.
And they play the song, and then they have like fans that like know them come up. They give them the box, and they're on stage playing the song. These people got the chicken, and they're just like handing out chicken, throwing them to people, throwing drumsticks. So you're just like sitting there at the sound booth, and this band's crushing it. By the way, they're very tight, and you're just seeing chicken wings and drumsticks flying over this crowd of people. People are reaching up trying to catch it. And you'll see people, they're just like happy. They're taking bites out of the chicken. And at the end of the night, you know, like you've heard of Guar, of course.
Oh, yeah,
you know how like how those shows go where at the end of that there's like blood and piss
shit
all over
everywhere.
the floor.
Yeah.
Well, this is like just like trampled on chicken bones and fried chicken. And it's just such a funny thing. And apparently there is some backstory to it. I guess they used to have a keyboard player, and his whole thing was he wanted the chicken for like himself to eat, and he would like put it on the table next to him at the keyboard, and he'd be like just eating it. Like it wasn't even supposed to be like a gimmick. It was just like the dude was just hungry. You know what I mean? Like, but it started to become a thing. They thought it was funny, so they requested this every night. So he got the chicken for himself on their rider. And then I guess I'm assuming he's no longer with the band, or maybe he just doesn't tour anymore. But now the whole thing is they just throw the fried chicken out to the crowd. It's just like I'd never seen it. It's funny because like when this happens, they hype it up. Like they're doing like one of those little interlude songs. They're doing a drum roll and shit. And they're like, all right, this next song's called Fried Chicken. Who's hungry for some chicken? These people come up, they start throwing it into the whole room. Everybody's either sticking their hand up to grab chicken, or they got their phone in the air because they just can't believe what they're seeing, and they need to record it because they're like, if I tell somebody about this, they're not going to believe me.
Yeah, who the fuck does that? That's great.
Yeah. That was definitely an interesting one.
That's pretty rad. So, you know, you were describing their sound, and that made me think, you know, every band has to sound different on stage. And not only do you have to deal with normally like a 3 or 4 band bill and adjust to like different sounds, but do you ever like do homework beforehand, like to get an idea like of what a band sounds like, if they're like super weird or like knows like I mean sometimes you know what a band's going to sound like by their name. You know, like Goat Horror is going to be a metal band.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I do that. I mean, it sometimes I'll just look at the flyer and I can kind of tell what it's going to be. Like, you know, when it's a punk show, you can pretty much tell by the flyer it's going to be a punk show. Or metal show, same thing. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times what I'll do is I don't do like a ton of homework, but I'll just, on the way to the venue, I might just like go on Spotify and find the bands and listen to a song or two just to get a vibe of what kind of band it is. It also helps me be a little prepared because like if I hear they have like some crazy keyboards and saxophones in the song, I'm like, okay, we're going to have to set up some extra stuff. And if they're like a really pop-oriented band where there's like a lot of like production and like synths and percussion and stuff, I can probably assume they're going to have some backtracks, and like when I mix them, I need to make sure that stuff stays prominent and not buried in the mix. And, I do a little homework. It's worth it.
It seems like it would make sense. I have a band I'm recording in January called Negative Racks, like a noise band, and they
Mm-hmm.
also have like a I don't know what you'd call it. It's a slide guitar. It was like it sits up on a tabletop, and I was like,
Yeah,
I had to let the sound guy know. I was like, you really need to listen to some of this stuff before you come in because it's not your traditional chugga chugga punk rock thing.
yeah,
It's a lot of dissonance out of the guitar, and it's all over the place. Like
yeah,
doing sound and recording it both is going to be a bit tricky, I think.
yep. Just some extra stuff to set up and understand.
So was it hard for you to do the stuff like at Florida Underground Fest? Because it was a lot of bands and it did change. I mean, I guess it did stick within the punk rock, ska, and metal, but is there enough variation in there? Or those bands make it like a little tricky to get the sound? Because you only had a little bit of time. Like it was a, what, 20, 30 minute changeover between every band?
Yeah. I don't say it's super tricky. Most of the time, the bands. This is something that it is interesting. Like there is a little bit of my job is important to reflect the sound of the band, but I really like it's not my job to try to manipulate a band's sound to make it sound better than they are. Really, my job is to just make sure it's louder and like everybody's audible and it's not like harsh on your ears, you know?
Sure.
So really, like most of the job especially at, like something like Florida Underground Fest where there's a lot of bands, it does help that the bands are all similar genres. So like,
Yep.
it's pretty similar to expect that all the drums gonna have a similar drum, like big punk drum sound.
Yep.
Because that's really the big thing is like you can make a band sound way different just by how you mix the drums. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like you can have your drums slamming and aggressive and like have some like big reverb that makes it sound huge. And that might not be the right sound for a band that's like doing like a funk thing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like so sometimes you need it more tight and dry and like and intricate and like so like that's the big one. But usually like with a lot of shows, it's pretty similar throughout the night. So really, your job is just to make sure that everything sounds good. If they're having technical difficulties, you're fixing it, and like you're making sure that they feel comfortable on stage with their monitoring. So like you end up doing almost more of a monitor engineer job
Yeah.
while just making sure the front of house is like nothing's getting screwed up throughout the night. And also like the hardest part, truthfully, in those situations is managing the cable spaghetti because we have so many mics
Yeah.
and like there was at one point I had like 6 vocal mics on stage because it was like 3 singers and like a bunch of horn players for a ska band.
Yeah.
So like the guy would grab the mic and he'd like move it over here and play the
Yes.
set over here. Then the next band would grab the mic and move it over here, and then all of a sudden now like I had these mics like on my console ordered like from left to right is 1 through 5, right?
Yep.
So I knew if I needed to adjust this one. Now they're all moved around, so I'm like, which one is which mic is which, So having to manage that and like try to be
Yeah.
mindful in between bands is also
We gotta
like
get like
something you got to think about.
colored mic cords. You're like, okay, that's
Yeah,
like
that would actually be very smart, truthfully, because then you can do whatever. That's the blue mic.
I
You
mean, that'd be
know,
weird though. Like I could just like a rainbow of color cords. I don't know. Black just seems normal, but like maybe
yeah,
just a little bit of
black is
colored,
good.
maybe just some colored duct tape around the end somewhere, just a little
Yeah,
bit.
I mean, I've seen people use colored XLRs before. Black's the standard just because it camouflages on the stage when they're on the
Yeah,
floor, so you don't see the mess of wires.
exactly. It's like no one wants to see that. Although I really love Will's stage because it's just in my mind it's like just the right height.
Yeah,
I go to a fair number of shows here, some places, and when they're sold out, or they got 100, 150 people, and the stage is only like 6 inches off the ground. If I'm standing in the back, I'm not seeing
you can't
anything.
see anything. Yeah,
You
you
can't
can't
see
see anything.
anything, and it's like that frustrates the hell out of me. I was like, and I'm like, maybe they don't have it up higher because they want to avoid stage diving. But like Will's doesn't really have any problem with that. They have the sign up there, and I'm sure it happens
Yeah,
now and then. But like
yeah, I've seen it a few
overall,
times, but it's not that crazy.
it's pretty minimal. But like I don't understand why venues don't do stages as much. Like, what is your experience? I know we're taking away from the sound guy thing, but like
No,
I
no.
don't feel like stages like because that's what about is it about 2 feet high? It Will's.
At Will's, uh, Honestly, it's probably like 3. It's pretty high.
Okay, so 3.
Maybe
Like,
2.5. Maybe 2.5. But it's pretty high. Yeah, I
it's
mean,
pretty high
when
in
I come up
comparison.
to it, it's like right at my waistline usually. Yeah.
But I can also lean against it then, right? So like if people start like
Yeah.
doing their circle pitting, like I don't have to like worry about bumping into the singer's face. Instead, I can like put my hands on the hold myself up. Like, but that does not seem to be the standard. The standard seems to be like the 2-inch or 3-inch stage.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely. Also, it might just genuinely be a cost thing. To build a
Yeah.
stage that tall requires more lumber, and you have to build it way sturdier because if it's that high up, you can't have it breaking or someone can fall through it.
Yeah.
A little 4 to 6 inch stage on the ground could be built frugally with like some 2x4s and or some not even 2 hours, some pallets and some plywood.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you wanted to, or just some 2x4s and call it a day.
That makes sense.
And it depends. Like some of the venues like that don't have like super full shows all the time. Like especially if it's like a open mic night or acoustic night or something like that, or like comedy night. It might be a little awkward to have someone so high up on the stage if the room's not
10
like
people there.
crowded with a sea of people,
Yeah.
So there may be some merit to that too, but
I know.
I agree. I think stages should be at least tall enough where you can see people's faces over the other heads.
At the bare minimum, I don't want to pay to go to a show and be in the back, which sometimes I prefer the back. Sometimes I don't want to be up front and get punched around.
That's just what happens when we get older.
Yeah, I'm
move further
50.
further back.
It depends on the show. It's like I was at Fest once, and my buddy was walking up front. He'd had a couple of beers, and it's like almost the last show of the night. And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to go check out Asshole Parade." I was like, "Nah, dude, come back with me." He's like, "Why?" I was like, "You don't want to be up front for Asshole Parade." Like, he's older than I am, and I'm like, "There's going to be some crowd killing." He's like, "Oh, you think so?" I was like, "Come back, sir. Come back. Stand in the back with me and watch. It's a plenty high enough stage. We'll see the band just fine. Just trust me on this one."
Just trust me. Speaking of funny crowds though, one of the funniest things I ever saw, I was on tour doing sound for my friends in this band Capstan, and we were supporting this band Crown the Empire, and so we were playing some pretty big venues. We were doing like House of Blues size venues, but we were in Tampa or St. Pete at Janus. Have you ever been there?
I have. I saw a Veil and Hot Water Music there.
Cool.
I think I saw the Circle Jerks there too.
Cool.
Wait, that might have been the same show. I can't remember.
Janus is cool because it's kind of like an outdoor stage and there's this little like confined area. But I remember one of the funniest things that I weirdly have never seen this before, and it seems like something you should have seen at like a Warped Tour or something. But during Capstan's set, it hadn't gotten dark out yet, so it still felt like an outdoors. Like when it gets dark, you kind of forget you're outside a little bit.
Yep.
But during their set, it was still light out, and there was like a big mosh pit. But then like 20 people were following each other, almost doing like a conga line, and then they all sat down like in between each other's legs, and like they were in a giant rowboat, and they all started like rowing together like this, and they made this like huge rowboat on the floor in the middle of the pit. And it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. I got a video of it somewhere.
That's awesome. Yeah,
it was so cool.
I was at a show earlier this year where everyone started like hardcore waltzing. Like they were doing they were doing the waltz, but like as they like did different moves, they were throwing their elbows, and it was like I was like, huh, okay, that's different. That's different. And they did the thing where I'm never sure with waltzes, right? They did the thing where they put the hand and they walked around. Like it was like Renaissance fair dancing, but with like violence.
Interesting. That'd be fun to see.
It was very interesting. I was like, what is this that's happening right now?
Sounds entertaining, at least to say the least. I remember growing up in Burlington, Vermont. There was a lot of like hardcore and punk shows, and there was a time where like some of the kids that were like really into the moshing scene, they like started this like mosh crew. They called it the Barefoot Crew, and they're
Nice.
all taking their shoes off and going in the
Oh
mosh pit
no.
barefoot. It's
Oh
like
no.
it was like a asserting your dominance kind of situation. Like,
Oh,
don't step on my foot because I'm gonna swing my fist at you if you do. And
holy shit.
it was pretty interesting. Like, you know, we were all like 16. You were young kids, like listening to some of these heavy bands, and these guys are just in there barefoot, just like don't give a fuck. And I was like, that's impressive, man.
Yeah. I would definitely not go into something like that barefoot. You know, it's
Yeah, I'm sure people got their foot stepped on plenty of times.
even nowadays, I sometimes get my foot stepped on. I'm like, oh, I remember when I had steel-toed combat boots I used to wear to shows, and I never had
Yeah.
to worry about that. I'm like, I was also the asshole kid that jumped off the stage with steel-toed boots, and I would jump off feet first. 'Cause I'd do like the backflip or whatever, and I'm like, God, what an
Yeah.
asshole I was.
Oh man, did you hear about that? There was this band. Speaking of stage diving, this is an interesting one. I don't know how to feel about it, but this band called Trophy Eyes. I don't know if you
Okay.
you might have heard about this. It was all
I
over the internet.
vaguely heard of the band, but I don't think I know the story you're about to tell me. So,
They're an Australian band. They're a cool band. The singer, like, apparently this venue, I don't remember where it is. It was in like Baltimore. I don't know. I don't want to say the wrong place. They apparently are notorious for having signs everywhere for no crowd surfing, and the singer, like, I guess decided he was just feeling himself during the set, and he decided to like stage dive, and
sure.
like the worst case scenario happened. He like landed on some girl's head, and like I don't know if it broke her neck or gave her a spinal injury, but she's paralyzed now.
Holy hell.
And it's been all over the internet right now, and like a lot of like venues have been discussing, like, the day after it happened, we'll put up new signs in the venue. It was like, no stage diving.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's unfortunate because those are some situations you don't really know how to like really navigate, because this poor girl, she's like paralyzed now.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm pretty sure like in a wheelchair paralyzed. And I just saw like there was a new article going around about how she's like filing a lawsuit against the singer, the venue, and the promoter. And it sucks because, you know, there's a lot of people that are like pointing fingers, like, wow, like, why would you do this? Why would you sue them? And it's like, I feel for both sides of the instance, you know, because she's probably got hit with some crazy hospital bills. Her life's never going to be the same. And like, how you, like, the hospital bills alone, like, we all know how expensive that shit
and
is.
like, and what kind of, you know, what modifications to your life are you gonna have to have? You can't drive, you can't get upstairs, you know.
But it is unfortunate because like that's probably going to be the end of that venue. You know what I mean? If they win this lawsuit, they're going to be screwed. Like, we had one in Orlando called Back Booth, and something similar happened.
Back Booth. Yeah.
Yeah, something similar happened. Somebody got like really hit bad in the face. They had to get like their jaw wired or something.
Is that why it changed into Soundgarden afterwards, or whatever it was
I
called?
think it might be. I'm not sure the exact details. I just know like that person had to basically like try to recoup the money for hospital bills, and that they probably ended up putting them under. I don't know for sure, you know, if that's why, but the timeline made it seem like that's what happened. And those situations suck because it's like we all, as like showgoers, love the camaraderie, and like stage diving and crowd surfing's part of that. Moshing's part of that. But it is weird because when those things happen, you have to start wondering like, well, how do you shift blame to make sure nobody gets fucked in that? Because it sucks. Like, if the venue gets screwed over in that situation and they have to shut down, then you have no place to have these shows.
And it doesn't even sound like, you know, the venue already didn't allow it, right? And the singer just decided to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not like there was a pervasive thing. Like, I was at a show in Albany where the stage diving was so excessive that I'm like, every like 30 seconds someone was jumping on my head. So I was like, fuck it. And I just moved to the back, a little further back to the left. And I usually videotape one song at every band I see. And I'm there videotaping, I got my beer. And this guy jumps right at me, and I'm like, I just turn slightly and let him hit the ground. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm not dropping my beer. I'm not dropping, you know, I moved away to not have anyone, you know, jump on me.
Yeah.
And you came right at me, and I'm like really pretty far away and on the outskirts. And I'm like, but yeah, it was like, I don't mind the stage diving, but it was getting to the point where I was like, okay, I'm really getting tired of my fucking head.
I know,
So
I get that. Being like a bigger dude that's taller at a lot of shows, like if I'm in the
yeah.
middle of like the big crowd, those I've had shows where like every 30 seconds I got someone tapping on my back, and I turn around like what, and they're like, and
Oh
they
yeah,
want me to
put
like
me up, put
hoist
me
them
up,
up,
put me up.
and it's like okay, the first one or two times, like all right, yeah, let's do it, I got you, and then like. I remember there was one show specifically. It must have happened like 12 times, and I started being like, no, like I'm trying to enjoy the show, and now my back fucking hurts.
Yeah.
I don't.
There's
I'm not here to just lift people up all day.
yeah, there's degrees to it, and I also get it. Like when I was younger, I probably didn't recognize any of that. When
Oh,
I
of
was
course
16
not.
or 17 going to a show,
You're
I
just
didn't
like,
recognize.
yeah, we're all here you're having just as much fun as I am, right? Let's
Yeah.
do this.
I mean, I could go to a Fugazi show and not do it because they didn't allow it. But if I was at a Sick of It All show, I was tearing shit up.
Yeah.
It's like, I could handle whatever vibe the band put out, but like I was definitely the kid that wanted to like move and jump and get on stage and jump off stage. Right? It's not like the greatest thing in the world to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, there can be points.
Yeah.
So, have you done sound anywhere else live or just Will's? Is that your predominant like only place or?
No, so I've done a bunch. I mean, Will's is like where I've done it the most for
Yeah.
sure. Because that's the only place I'm like really like full time, like not full time, but like I'm full on employed at.
Yeah.
But I've mixed at the Conduit before. I've done a couple shows at the Abbey. I do work at the Beecham too. I haven't really done any like mixing there, to be honest. I just did like a stagehand and monitors shift, but like when I do touring front of house with bands, I've definitely like we'll just travel and I'll ride with them, and I do sound at every venue we're at. So I've definitely done a lot of shows now in a lot of different sized rooms, and
Because that seems complicated. Because you had mentioned how like Will's is like a clamshell, so
Yeah.
it sounds to me like you've got to figure it out everywhere you go.
Yep.
The different room makeup. Plus, I'm assuming the audience size matters
Yeah.
too because it absorbs the
Big
sound.
time.
So
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the bigger venues I did on the last tour, it was very interesting. You're in like a 2,000 cap room, and during sound check, that room is empty, and you sound check, and it's like so echoey, and like you're like, oh god, this sounds terrible.
yeah,
And then like the room fills out, and the show happens, and you're like, that sounded awesome. Like it's
and this thing like
just
you have to like accept that it's going to sound different.
yeah, and you have to remind yourself that, be like, okay, this is gonna sound different when the room's full of people. Like let's
And I
rock
know
with
that
it.
intellectually, but like I don't know how different it's going to sound because I'm not smart enough to know that. If someone wanted to do what you do, like it sounds like you're self-taught. I imagine some people go to schools, but like, what's the most common path that someone says, you know what I really want to do? I want to stay up late 5 nights a week, record, doing sound checks, watching people drink beer while I don't, but I want to hear good music and like just be part of the music I love. Like, how should they get into this? Like, what would be the best way for someone to do this?
Well, there's a lot of ways to do it. Some people do go to school, like Full Sail and Valencia have like, they have like programs for audio, both live sound and studio, and so you could go that route. And like those schools usually like can help you get placed into jobs right after. But the other thing is also just being friendly with people that do it already, and start like just asking them pointers. Maybe they'll let you shadow. Like this is not an open invite because I get tired sometimes. But I have had a few people now like do that, and like I let them shadow me a few times at Will's.
Okay.
And, like it's totally fine. I'm never like a dick about it. There are definitely some times where I'm like stressed to the max because it's like a crazy show with a lot of bands, and people are like trying to ask you questions, and I'm like, can we talk about this later? Like, I'm trying to work, but like there are a lot of times also where it's like a super chill show,
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, if you want to come hang out and like learn, like some guys, it depends on the venue. There are some sound guys that are like, we call them old heads. They've been doing it forever. They usually don't even tell you the real name. They have a stage name like, my name's Lemon. My name is. They have like some weird name like I'm cardboard. Like They got some weird stage. It was like an old thing, just like bikers did. You just had like a nickname.
Sure, I get that. Or like punk rockers.
Yeah, but some guys get a little gatekeepy about it because maybe it's a self-preservation thing. They don't want to lose their job or what. But
sure,
I don't know. I mean, I don't mind teaching people, and like it is sometimes feels like it's a little tricky to get started in that if you don't know people to get started. So people ask me all the time, like, hey, like, is Will's hiring? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. I'm one of the few people here, and I only work a couple days a week, so I don't know if they're looking to add more people. And
how many more people they need on their list? So
if it was so busy, where like we were all the guys working here were like, fuck, I need a day off. It'd be a little different. But truthfully, it's like I only work 1 or 2 days a week usually. So if that's the case, I can't imagine they can squeeze out more for other people. But
and you've got to have that ear, right? Like I was telling you, I was like, I don't, have an ear for that, and maybe I could have trained it. But I remember, like, my community college had like a recording arts, like, associate's degree. But I was taking Guitar 1 in high school as senior year, and I was like, all right, I've been playing guitar for a year, and I still can't tune my guitar on my own. I'm not sure I'm the right guy to be managing a recording studio in any way, shape, or form.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you have to have an ear for it, but really the biggest thing, I think the hardest part I think anybody can figure out and how, like, you can, like, some of the stuff that, like if you were watching me during the show, I'm a little more, like, very hands-on with it, but that's just because I'm over the top. And, like, not to say that people that don't do that are, like, less, are inferior at writing things, but there are definitely ways to just do a really good show and keep it really simple and not need to go, like, super in-depth, and it's not a big deal. I'm just always, like, trying new things, so I just put myself in situations where I keep working.
Dude, I have really enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, dude, it's been awesome.
I'm going to close out the show with a song, and I figured might as well close out with one of yours, so you tell me what Overthinker song you'd like me to close out this with.
Here's a perfect timing plug. I didn't even think about this. We just put out a song. It came out today. So
Fuck
you can play that one if you want. It's called Yes
right.
Man. It just came out today. I guess technically at midnight last night, but brand new song. So
awesome, sick. All right, everybody, thanks for coming out. This has been Tony Murphy, not Bud, hanging out, talking about doing sound. I learned a lot. I hope you learned a lot, and I really appreciate you all hanging out and listening with DCPC Live, supporting the scene, motherfuckers. Rock on.
I know I'm a yes man, don't call me again. And I know I'm a yes man, don't call me again. Breaking my back for everyone but me.